Zohran Mamdani made history Tuesday in New York City's Democratic mayoral primary. The 33-year-old immigrant, who's a Democratic socialist, beat former Governor Andrew Cuomo with 45% of support in ranked choice voting.
He won big-time endorsements from AOC and Bernie Sanders, but his ultra-progressive platform, including a $30 minimum wage, rent freeze, his criticism of Israel, and $40 minimum wage, and refusal to condemn the slogan "Globalize the Intifada" have caused big pause from critics. Our next guest included a lifelong New Yorker and a third-generation Holocaust survivor whose great-great-grandparents were killed in Auschwitz. Daniella Greenbaum Davis called Mamdani a, quote, train wreck. Joining us now to elaborate is Daniella. Good morning. Thanks for joining us. Let's start with that "Globalize the Intifada" commentary from Zohran Mamdani. He effectively defended that statement, saying that it meant Palestinian freedom. What about his comments about Israel have you found to be concerning?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think saying things like globalize the intifada is, saying intifada means struggle or it's a struggle for freedom is kind of like saying Mein Kampf means struggle, which it literally does in the German, but nobody would okay someone rallying around Mein Kampf because we all know what that really means. It's the same as like a swastika can be a symbol of peace and harmony if you are in some East Asian nations, but if you draw it on a Jewish synagogue in the US, nobody thinks you're like an Indian offering peace and harmony. It's very clear that it's an anti-Semitic hate crime. And so I think having like a little context and just using common sense is really important when thinking about terminology like globalize the intifada.
Your initial take, Daniela, was that this was a train wreck. Could you expand on that? What did you mean?
Yeah, I was actually referring to watching Cuomo's loss. It was a train wreck in slow motion. Um, I mean, Mamdani's win also, but I think we blame people who are upset about Mamdani's win are blaming progressives for supporting Mamdani, and certainly I share in that view. And also, it was a train wreck in slow motion in that the moderates put up a candidate who was plagued by a lot of issues, and who, in a best case scenario, people were sort of holding their nose to vote for just because the alternative was so much worse. And sometimes that's what politics is about. Sometimes it's a vote for the least bad option. But I just think sort of the more moderate worlds keep doing that in elections. We saw that with Hillary Clinton. In some ways, we saw that with Biden. And it's frustrating as a moderate. Like, I wish we could have candidates we're all excited by again.
What do you think is the biggest part of Mamdani's platform or the policy that will perhaps negatively impact New York City the most? I've heard, just talking to real estate experts, that they're very concerned about the rent freeze, for example. They think that a lot of wealthy homeowners are going to potentially leave the city for somewhere that is more affordable. What are some of the other concerning policies that you found in his platform?
I think the one that's sort of the most economically troubling would be the $40 minimum wage, because every small business in New York, plenty of which, by the way, are minority owned, will collapse with a $40 minimum wage. And by extension, people that earn minimum wage, again, a lot of minorities, will end up without a job because they won't be employed anymore by businesses that will force to be closed. And I think that's a big part of the reason why you saw so many minorities turn out for Cuomo, and so many sort of like white progressives turn out for Mamdani. A lot of it is sort of they have the privilege to support a candidate whose economic policies at the end of the day might be annoying for them, but another percent or two in taxes, it's not gonna make people who earn above a certain amount go hungry. It might make them want to leave the city. It might make them very upset. It might be, damaging, but it's not gonna make them go hungry. But if you are an employee who earns minimum wage and all of the businesses that you would be employed by close, that's not just, an extra percent on your taxes. That's annoying, or a vacation you don't get to take. That's sort of life and death.
I want to touch on, Daniela, the importance of also seeing this big picture, right? We know that there was a ton of energy on the ground for Mamdani. Do you see this as a trend against more long-term, so to speak, Democratic establishment lawmakers or candidates, mayoral candidates who may be, looking at this and really observing and wondering, is this what we're going to face in our own districts?
Look, Mamdani's primary win is a giant gift for DSA, and it's a huge shot across the bow for all Democrats who are sort of more moderate and less radical, both in New York and nationally. I think we're going to see a lot of energy go into primarying more moderate Democrats across all levels of government. So, yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of ripple effects for this. At the same time, I also want to acknowledge we're talking about 400,000-ish people voting for Mamdani. You're still talking about roughly 7 to 9% of New Yorkers who are registered to vote. So while this is significant and will have ripple effects, it's also not, necessarily evocative of every Democratic voter in the country.
Well, I just want to put it in context. He was basically unknown, though, going in. So that number is huge for, even as he said, maybe 1% of New Yorkers knew him prior to this race. So, in that
great campaign.
Yeah, in that vein, we
I
giving credit to that. Yeah.
I disagree with his policies. I think he's going to be a terrible mayor. I hope he doesn't win in the general. And I really do think he would be disastrous for New York, but you got to give it to the guy. He ran a great campaign.
Speaking of the general election, he will face Eric Adams, the independent candidate, and then Curtis Sliwa, the Republican candidate. Do you think, based on the fact that it's sort of taken for granted that New York will elect a Democrat, that Adams and Sliwa reach some kind of deal where only one of them ends up running in the general? And what will Cuomo do? Because he said that he would run as an independent if he lost the primary too, which could potentially pull votes away from one of those other choices and essentially hand Mamdani the victory.
I think the only chance whatsoever of preventing a Mamdani victory would be for all three of those people to coalesce around a single one of them. From a pure polling perspective, Cuomo still has the best shot in a head-to-head against Mamdani. But my money is that the candidates will coalesce around Adams. And I think a large part of this is going to be about turning out voters who don't normally vote in mayoral elections, but who will hopefully be sort of motivated to actually get their asses to the polls because of the threat of a Mamdani mayoral win.
All right, thanks, Daniela. We appreciate you joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
You bet.
We have a lot of topics to cover to talk more about rising coming up right after this.